Hush, the woman who owned everything, and begged for a drop of water. There was once a woman so wealthy she believed nothing on earth could ever bring her low. She had silk, she had servants, she had a name that made entire towns fall silent when she passed. And yet one day, that same woman was found on her knees in the dirt, her voice cracked to nothing, begging a stranger for a single sip of water. How does a woman who has everything fall so far, and what quiet mistake in her heart led her there? Stay with me, because this story will surprise you, and it will teach you something you won't forget. Her name was Camilla, and at 32 years old she was the richest woman in the province. She lived inside a sprawling estate with iron gates painted gold, marble floors that echoed her footsteps, and tall windows that opened onto gardens bursting with jasmine. Servants trailed her from sunrise to sunset, ready to bring her breakfast, her clothes, her every passing wish before she'd even finished saying it aloud. If she raised one finger, a dozen people moved. If she sighed, the whole house went quiet. Camilla never cooked. She never cleaned. She had never once in her entire life poured her own glass of water. Everything arrived to her on silver trays and crystal cups, and she had come to believe this was simply how the world was supposed to work, built entirely around her comfort. Her mornings opened with music, soft and unhurried. Servants brought her warm bread, honeyed cream, and fruit picked before dawn just for her table. She had never known what it meant to wake up hungry. She had never felt the hollow ache of an empty stomach. To her, bread was just bread, no story behind it, no weight, no meaning. She ate it without ever once thanking the hands that made it. Water reached her in golden pitchers, cool and clear, and she drank without a second thought, never imagining that in other places, people walked for miles just to find a single clean well. For Camilla, thirst was a word she'd only ever read in books. Her estate was so grand that she often laughed quietly at how small everyone outside its walls seemed. From her balcony, she watched men hauling heavy loads down the road and women bent over in the fields. She watched barefoot children chasing each other through the dust. Sometimes the voices of beggars drifted up to her gates, but she simply closed her ears to them. Why should any of that concern me? She would think. Their world isn't my world. She believed her fortune made her untouchable, and pride sat in her chest like a cold, heavy stone. And yet, for all its gold, her estate held a strange emptiness. The walls gleamed, but there was no real laughter inside them. People feared Camilla far more than they loved her. Her servants bowed, but not one of them ever smiled at her, not truly. She mistook their fear for respect. Every corner of her home looked flawless, and still, somewhere underneath all that polish, something in her was parched. Not for water, for meaning. She couldn't see it or name it, but her life was as dry as a desert hidden beneath silk carpets. Camilla believed her fortune would last forever. She believed her halls would always shine, her table would always overflow, and her cup would never once run dry. She had no idea that one small journey, one sudden twist of fate, was about to shatter everything she thought she knew about herself. She had no idea a day was coming when all her gold, all her jewels, all her servants would mean absolutely nothing. A day when her throat would burn, her lips would crack, and she would whisper a single word she never imagined herself saying, "Please, water." That summer, Camilla decided to leave her estate. She wanted the villages beyond the hills to witness her beauty and her wealth firsthand. She dressed in a crimson silk gown that caught the sunlight with every step, gold chains circling her throat, diamonds glittering on every finger. Behind her walked a dozen servants, each one weighed down with trunks of jewelry, fine clothing, and gifts to hand out along the way. She rode in a gilded carriage pulled by 4 white horses, and everywhere they passed, people stopped and stared. Farmers bowed low. Children pointed and whispered. Poor women murmured to one another as the carriage rolled by. Camilla smiled, certain of one thing: nobody is greater than I am. As the carriage moved from village to village, she flaunted her wealth like a performance. She tossed small coins to children in the road, not out of kindness, but to watch them scramble and fight over them. When villagers approached asking for help, she raised a gloved hand and turned her face away. She believed her beauty and her gold made her untouchable. Her servants fed her pride with every word. "My lady, the world belongs to you," they told her, and she believed it completely, certain she'd been chosen by heaven itself to rule over everyone she saw. Pride filled her more completely than the very air she breathed. But the long road began to test her. The sun grew fiercer with every passing day. Dust coated the road, and the carriage wheels shuddered over broken stone. Still, Camilla refused to slow down or rest. She wanted every village to see her shining carriage pass through. Her servants grew exhausted. Sweat soaked through their clothes, but she pushed them onward without mercy. "Move my things faster," she snapped. "I don't like to wait." Their pain never touched her. Only her pride mattered, and the eyes of strangers watching her pass. As they traveled farther from the city, the villages grew smaller, the people the roads harsher. Still, she barely noticed, too absorbed in adjusting her jewelry and fixing her hair in a small silver mirror. When one servant stumbled and nearly dropped a trunk, she struck him across the face. "Don't embarrass me in front of others," she snapped, her voice sharp, her heart untouched. The poor man lowered his head and kept walking while she laughed at her own reflection. She believed her journey was a parade of her own greatness. She had no idea what truth waited just beyond the next hill, a place where gold would mean nothing, where beauty could save no one, and where her thirst would grow larger than her pride ever had. The sun climbed higher, and Camilla's lips began to crack, her throat starting to burn. She reached for her jeweled cup, empty. She called for water, and her servants scrambled through the trunks, but every pitcher had run dry. They had traveled too far, and no one had thought to refill them. Furious, she shouted, "Find water now!" Her servants scattered through the fields and abandoned houses, but there was nothing. Only dust, stone, and the hollow sound of dry wind. Finally, they spotted an old well at the edge of a deserted village. Camilla stepped down from the carriage, her silk gown dragging through the dirt, and walked toward it with her chin held high. Certain cool water waited below. But when the servants lowered the bucket, it came back holding only dry sand. The echo inside the well was hollow and empty. Her eyes went wide with disbelief. "This cannot be happening," she cried. She looked around, expecting anyone to appear with a jug of water. But the village stayed silent, its doors broken, its ground cracked from years without rain. Her throat tightened, and for the first time her pride began to tremble. She turned to her servants. "Search farther, every house, every field, bring me water." They obeyed, though they too were weak with thirst. Hours passed, and not one of them returned with a single drop. Camilla sank down beside the dry well, the sun scorching her skin, the jewels around her neck suddenly feeling like chains. She pressed her lips together, trying to hide her fear, but inside her chest, something new was rising: helplessness. A poor farmer's wife appeared at the edge of the village, carrying a clay jug with a small amount of water inside. Camilla rushed toward her, hands outstretched, jewels flashing. "Give it to me," she demanded. The woman shook her head gently. "This water is for my children, it's all we have." Camilla tore a gold ring from her finger and held it out. "Take this, just give me the jug." But the woman stepped back. "Gold can't fill an empty stomach, diamonds can't ease thirst. My children need this water more than you need your pride." Then she turned and walked away. Camilla dropped to her knees, her silk gown swallowed in dust. For the first time in her life, her gold and jewels meant nothing at all, and a truth cut through her chest like a blade: her wealth had no power here. Kneeling before the empty well, her pride began to crumble, and in that silence under the burning sun, she tasted real fear for the very first time. She whispered to herself, "What if I can't survive this?" Her lips were dry, her throat on fire. She held out her jewelry, gold catching the light, and approached the first man she saw. "Please," she said, "give me water, I'll give you this gold chain." The man looked at her and shook his head. "Gold cannot ease thirst," he said, and walked away. She stood there, stunned. For the first time in her life, her treasure meant nothing. She had always believed gold could buy anything, but here, in the dust, even gold was worth less than a single drop of water. She stumbled toward a group of women carrying clay jugs on their heads. "Please," she begged, "I'll give you diamonds, I'll give you pearls, just one sip." The women looked at her fine clothes, her heavy jewels, and laughed bitterly. "Your jewels can't fill our jugs," one of them said. "Keep them, we have no water to spare for your pride." Her words cut deep like knives. Camilla lowered her head, feeling smaller than she ever had in her life. Her pride was breaking apart, but her thirst only grew stronger. The sun climbed higher still. Her feet sank into the burning dust as she wandered, stumbling. She tried once more with an old farmer carrying a bucket. "Please, sir, I beg you, just a sip of water," she whispered. He looked at her with tired, sorrowful eyes. "I only have enough for my family," he said. "Your jewels mean nothing to me. You should have thought of the poor before today." He turned and left her alone. Tears filled her eyes. No one had ever refused her anything in her whole life, but today she had been refused again and again. Her hands trembled. Her gold bracelets slid off her wrists into the dirt, and for once she didn't even care. She collapsed to her knees, dust clinging to her skin, her face wet with sweat and tears. She lifted her hands and cried out, "Is there no one who will give me even one drop of water? Must I die here, surrounded by all this gold?" Her voice echoed through the empty street, but no one came. People watched her, then turned away. They were tired of her proud face and fine clothes. They wanted her to feel just once what they had always felt, powerlessness. At last she sank into the dust, broken. The gold that once filled her with pride now felt like chains dragging her down. Her lips were cracked, her voice barely a whisper. "So this is the price of pride," she murmured. "This is the truth of life. All my jewels can't buy even a single glass of water." She closed her eyes and thought of her estate, her soft bed, her fountains, all of it gone, all of it useless. Only the thirst remained, and in that thirst she began to see her own life through new eyes. She began to understand a lesson no palace had ever taught her. Camilla sat in the dirt, her body weak, her lips dry, her eyes wide with fear. She had asked so many people for water, but no one had listened. They only turned their faces away. Some had even laughed at her. She felt smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. Her heavy jewels meant nothing now. Her gold bracelets felt like shackles. Her silk gown clung to her body like a burden. She whispered softly, "Just one drop, please, just one drop of water." But the crowd kept moving past her. Her voice disappeared into the noise of the world. Just when she thought she couldn't go on, a small voice reached her ears. "You need water, ma'am." Camilla lifted her head slowly. Standing before her was a poor boy, barefoot, his clothes torn at the seams. His face was thin, his hands dirty, but his eyes shone with something gentle. In his small hands he held a clay jug. Camilla blinked, hardly able to believe it. "Water," the boy said softly. She nodded weakly. "Yes, take it, you look so thirsty." Tears filled her eyes. This wasn't a servant or a wealthy friend or a guard. This was a child from the dust of the road. His feet were cracked, his shirt full of holes, but his heart was whole. With trembling hands, she took the jug and lifted it to her lips. The first drop touched her tongue and felt like heaven itself. The water tasted sweeter than every delicacy she'd ever eaten in her palace. Her heart trembled with gratitude. She drank slowly, holding each swallow like a treasure. The boy smiled. "You should rest. You're not strong right now." Camilla looked at him, tears rolling down her cheeks. Why did you give me this? I have nothing to give you in return." The boy shrugged. "Because you needed it, and because I know what it feels like to be thirsty." His words settled deep in her chest. She thought of every time she'd ignored the poor in her city, every time she'd shut her gates on beggars, every time she'd let food go to waste while others had none. The jug was empty now, but her heart, for the first time, felt full. She held the boy's hand tightly, as though clinging to the last piece of hope left in the world. "You saved me," she whispered, "more than you'll ever know." For the first time in her life, Camilla understood what it meant to be weak, to depend entirely on the kindness of someone who had nothing at all. The one who answered her cry for water wasn't rich, or powerful, or strong. He was only a poor boy with a good heart. Camilla held the jug in her hands and drank slowly. She had never tasted anything so sweet. It was only plain, clear water, but to her it felt like the richest drink in the world. She closed her eyes and, for the first time in her life, felt real gratitude for something so simple. All her gold, all her jewels, all her servants had never once given her this feeling. Only the kindness of a poor child had saved her. She looked at the boy, tears filling her eyes. "Why did you help me when I had nothing to give you?" she asked. He smiled and said, "Because water belongs to everyone. No one should suffer from thirst." His words struck her heart like lightning. She had spent her whole life believing wealth was power, but in that moment she saw the truth. Kindness was far greater than gold. When she finally returned to her estate, she was no longer the same woman. Diamonds and silk gowns no longer mattered to her. She ordered her servants to carry clean water to the villages nearby. She gave food to the hungry and built wells so people could drink freely, without fear, without begging. The very people who once feared her began to love her instead. They no longer saw a proud woman, but a kind leader. Camilla herself felt lighter and freer than she ever had in her life of gold and silk. She finally understood that life was never about flaunting wealth. It was about sharing what you have. She remembered the small hands of that boy holding out the jug, and she knew she would carry that memory for the rest of her life. His gift had changed her forever. And so the story of the rich woman who once begged for water became known far beyond her province. People told it again and again, not to shame her, but to remind others of the lesson hidden inside it. Rich or poor, no one escapes thirst and no one escapes need. But kindness, even a single drop of it, has the power to heal, to save, and to change a heart forever. This was the story of the woman who begged for water. She learned that gold and jewels could never save her, but kindness could. What do you think holds more power, wealth or kindness? Tell us in the comments if this story moved you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional, true-to-life stories, only here on this channel. See you in the next one.